But another important thing that we need to discuss, just shifting on topics, because this week it seems that Keir Starmer has been listening to me. I've been calling for a change to the House of Lords, that we need to reform it for years and years, actually. And finally, Keir Starmer seems to have come off the fence and says that he actually wants to abolish he calls it indefensible House of Lords. Well, what better to discuss this than to talk to a peer of the realm, the wonderful Baroness Claire Fox, who is, of course, the director of the Academy Ideas. Claire, a very good morning to you. Now, firstly, I must congratulate you, Claire. I think it's the 20th anniversary of the Debating Matters competition that you set up for sixth forms. Before we talk about the House of Lords, please do give a plug for that. I was fascinated to read about it.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. It's so important, isn't it, when we know about cancel culture hitting campuses, that one of the things that Debating Matters all those years ago realised was that if we could get young people to realise there are two sides to a story, and the Debating Matters competition provides topic guides so people can read articles for and against whatever the issue is, building homes on the green belt, or whether we should pull statues down. So we don't anticipate that they will agree with one side or the other. They have to argue through a position as debaters. So tomorrow, is it tomorrow night? Yeah, Monday the 12th, we've got a big anniversary with Ali Miraj, who's the founder of the Contrarian Prize, giving a lecture, and we're having mince pies and wine and some testimonials.
That's fantastic. And it's even gone international, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, the competition has taken place in India, in Israel, regularly in Berlin, in Germany, and all over the UK. So people should check it out. I was one of the founders, but it's now its own charity, and it deserves all the help it gets.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, you've always been a great champion for free speech and for debate, and obviously there's lots of speech that goes on in the House of Lords. I know you're a frequent speaker, but we've now got the Labour Party saying they would like to change, to replace or to reform the House of Lords. And I know that, in a sense, you've seen both sides of it. You've seen it from without, and now you're seeing it from within. What's your latest take on what Labour are saying, and what their plans might be relative to your own thoughts?
So I think that when I heard the headline, prompted by this Gordon Brown constitutional review, which is quite a serious document, by the way, people should have a look at it. It's 150 pages. But I credit to the Labour Party for taking seriously constitutional problems like the House of Lords. The headline was abolish the House of Lords. And I think superficially, I totally am with him on that. I think that it is indefensible to have a second chamber that's made up of unelected, appointed peers, because inevitably, although people will concentrate on saying, oh, there's 92 hereditary, how unfair is that? But how unfair is it that people like me, or cronies from the Labour Party or cronies from the Conservative Party, are just appointed there by the Prime Minister of the day, the leaving Prime Minister, or the opposition leader? I mean, it was stuffed full by Tony Blair, went on to be stuffed full by the coalition with the Lib Dems and Cameron. And, we now know there's so many Tory prime ministers that you could carry on stuffing it full. And I don't take away from the fact that I was one of the people that got stuffed in. I think that one of the things that happened, and people were outraged when I was given a peerage, I understand it. But there was a recognition by the Conservatives that Brexit wouldn't have got done if it hadn't been for some people on the left who were leavers. So Gisela Stewart, Kate Hoey, and myself, I think, were the three people who were kind of, oh, well, we'll give a nod to those kind of Brexity voting types in the red wall by sticking them in. And it was a real dilemma to take it or not, but nonetheless, you use it to try and debate. However, I've read the review, and the problem is that what the Labour Party are proposing to replace the House of Lords with should worry us. Yes, they're talking about an elected chamber, but one which would be effectively a rival to the Commons, based up of the nations and regions. And all I can tell you is it's going to be like, I mean, can you imagine the Welsh government and the Scottish government as a kind of and the kind of Greater Manchester government and then the Yorkshire government and all the rest of it as rivals. So what you're going to get is potentially a kind of a semi-elected but nonetheless regionalised threat to what is the real democratic heart of the country, which is the Commons. And you and I are both equally disillusioned with what happens in the Commons, but nonetheless, they are accountable nationally through the nation state to the people of the
Claire,
UK.
you've seen it from inside. Do we need a second chamber at all? Many nations don't have a second chamber.
I wouldn't have a second chamber. That's what I do. I'd go for unicameral, as they say. And the arguments used against me are often that, yes, but the Commons are useless at writing legislation. There's not enough scrutiny. The laws are often poorly conceived. Well, that's no excuse, is it? I mean, maybe if you only had one chamber, they'd get better at writing laws. It would be clearer who we could blame for those laws, because oftentimes what happens is the Lords actually will amend and change the law. It all gets very confusing as to who you blame for what. A bit like the way we had with the EU, which is who is making these laws.
Yes, because in theory, sort of one of the proponents of it is that the Lords is full of wise, experienced people who can pick up the unintended consequences of badly drafted legislation. And the question is, how do we get the best of both worlds without having something that slows things down and costs a fortune?
Well, of course, it's important that, you know, there are scrutineers of laws, but as I say, that can be done internally within the Commons. I mean, there's no reason. And also, by the way, politicians need to get better at drafting laws. But the idea that the House of Lords is full of these wise people, well, you really have to look at me. But it's not that. We also don't want this kind of notion of the experts checking on the kind of hoi polloi, which is, you know, that's why it's the Commons and the Lords. We're supposedly, well, I can assure you there's no expertise. But an indication, I mean, there's loads of experts in the House of Lords, but what are they experts in? So just to give you an example, we've been recently discussing the higher education academic free speech bill, and all of the people that have effectively made that bill toothless in the laws, they've forced the government to accept all these amendments, which effectively mean there's no basis on which you can sue if you're attacked for academic freedom. The people who say they're experts, what are they expert in? Oh, I know, they all run Oxford colleges. So when they say they're experts with a very particular expertise, i.e. they're the elite, they're in charge of things. So that's not the same as having experts who are, for example, academics who are cancelled or students who are frightened into self-censorship. So we have to be very careful about this idea of the wise man and woman syndrome, because it usually means people who are self-appointed, who know better than the rest of us.
Absolutely fascinating. A message just come in here. This is a subject that needs help, and in a sense, it's not being properly debated. I think that's really, really interesting, Claire, your point that actually, if there was just a single chamber, then there would be more accountability. But would that help improve the quality of people in the House of Commons? No,
well, I mean, I think that we need. I mean, you're associated with Reform UK. What really needs reforming, of course, is the House of Commons. I mean, we should abolish the House of Lords and get rid of it and reform the House of Commons. I mean, there should be recall of MPs, for example. You know, all of these things that are often discussed. I'm not suggesting we should be complacent about the House of Commons. I'm suggesting that's what Democrats should care about, is making sure the House of Commons is fit for purpose. And I'm afraid at the moment we can all be disillusioned, but you can't compensate for that by having this second chamber. Just one thing, Richard, I don't know if you remember when we were in Brussels and Strasbourg a bit, you and I used to be in a load of committees where all they kept saying was the most important thing is not just the EU, but actually is regionalism in different countries, because they're at war, if you want, with the nation state.
Yes.
They would much prefer to have a kind of deal with Greater Manchester than they would with Westminster, right? And this regionalism is very much at the heart of Gordon Brown's proposals and picked up by Keir Starmer, that you give more power around the country. That's not to ordinary people. That's not giving back control to the people in Stockport you were talking to yesterday. It's local regional bureaucrats even more excessive powers.
That's right. Well, just while you've been talking, Claire, Barry's just messaging a House of Lords reform he would like to see is that all appointed peers should be time limited to 5 years, not appointed for life. Is that a halfway house you would consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think that. Well, I mean, I just want to get rid of it. But I think that where Barry's right, if you want, is the idea that you've got a lifetime peerage. The notion is that you will be beholden to no one, and that might give you a certain independence of mind, right? That in a way you don't have to worry about getting re-elected. I mean, that's anti-democratic in and of itself.
Yes.
Yeah, there is something about that which at least notionally should work. But since I've been in, Richard, I've realised that the whip system is just as savage in the House of Lords. It doesn't mean that there's more independent thinking at all. And I'd urge your viewers and listeners to take a look at the debate initiated by the Archbishop of Canterbury on migration, refugees, and the small boats situation, just to see that there's very little. There's a great deal of self-righteousness in the House of Lords, but it's very much speaking with the same voice.
Interesting.
So the idea that you're freed up to have these brilliant debates because you're in there for life is just not, in my experience, true.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, Claire, you're at the heart of it. You're seeing it from within, and I think that's really, really interesting. So a huge thank you for being with us and sharing that, Claire, on Tice Talk this morning. That is Baroness Claire Fox. She's director of the Academy of Ideas. It's the 20th anniversary of the competition for sixth forms that she founded, Debating Matters. She is an absolute champion of debate, of free speech, and she is not happy with what she sees in the House of Lords. And I want to hear your thoughts, your views on the House of Lords. Keep it, reform it, abolish it. What do you think? Let's head to Essex, where Richard